You wake up tired but not exhausted. That's the dangerous part. You're not drowning. You're not desperate. You're not failing. You're comfortable enough. And that comfort is exactly what's keeping you broke. Not broke on paper, not broke compared to others, but broke in the only way that matters, broke in control. You earn well, maybe better than most people you know. Your parents would be proud of your income. And yet, deep down, there's a quiet tension you can't explain, a subtle anxiety that never fully turns off. Because no matter how high your income climbs, your life still feels fragile. One missed paycheck feels heavier than it should. One unexpected expense creates more stress than it should. One bad month would change everything. And that doesn't make sense, because you're doing well. This audiobook exists because of that contradiction. In this audiobook, High Income Not Equals Rich, you're going to discover why earning more money often makes people more trapped, not freer. Why salaries create the illusion of progress while quietly draining control. And why cash flow, not income, is the real line between stability and freedom. Here's the punchline most people never hear. A high income can keep you poor longer than a low one. Because poverty is not about how much you earn. It's about how dependent your life is on your next paycheck. And dependency wears expensive clothes. This audiobook is not about quitting your job tomorrow. It's not about get rich quick. It's not about unrealistic fantasies. This is about understanding the system you're inside and learning how to step outside it without blowing up your life. Over the next chapters, we're going to break down why salary is designed to feel safe but behave like a leash, why lifestyle inflation is automatic and invisible, why banks love disciplined earners more than reckless spenders, why cash flow changes how your brain reacts to money, why rich people protect gaps, not incomes, and how to redesign your financial life so money works for you, even when you sleep. If you've ever thought, why do I make good money but feel behind? Why does every raise disappear? Why does financial stress stay the same no matter how much I earn? You're in the right place, because the problem isn't you. It's the way money reaches you. Let's start with the most uncomfortable truth of all. Salary was never designed to make you rich. It was designed to make you predictable. When money arrives in small scheduled fragments, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, your brain adapts. You don't see wealth. You see obligations, rent, mortgage, car payment, insurance, subscriptions, utilities, lifestyle commitments that quietly lock in. Your income never feels like a resource. It feels like a maintenance tool. And that's not accidental. When money comes in slowly and leaves quickly, you never experience abundance, even when you earn it. You experience flow-through, and flow-through is the opposite of wealth. Wealth accumulates, flow-through disappears. This is why two people can earn the same income and live radically different lives. One feels trapped, the other feels calm. Not because of discipline, not because of intelligence, because of structure. And structure is what this audiobook will teach you to see. If this message already resonates, pause for a moment, take a breath. Notice how your body reacts when money comes up. That reaction tells the truth. In the next chapter, we're going to expose the salary trap, how income fragmentation rewires your perception of security, and why the system gives you just enough comfort to stop you from asking the wrong questions. Because once you see how the trap works, you can't unsee it. Dear viewer, share your success story, even if it is small. It can motivate other people to visit the comment section and read it, and it can inspire them. Also, don't be shy about asking questions, and perhaps someone with more experience or someone who has been through this will share the answer. Remember, it is only through communication that people become stronger and better. Thank you. Chapter 2. The Salary Trap. Salary feels safe. That's why it works. Not safe in reality, safe in perception. A predictable deposit, a familiar rhythm, a sense of order. Your brain loves patterns, and salary is one of the strongest behavioral patterns ever created. Because when money arrives on schedule, your nervous system relaxes, even if the amount is barely enough, even if it disappears immediately, even if it changes your future. This is the salary trap, and it doesn't look like a trap. It looks like adulthood. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Salary trains you to think in fragments instead of systems. You don't see money as a growing resource. You see it as a monthly survival cycle. Payday to relief. Bills to drain. Repeat. This loop conditions your emotions. Relief becomes temporary. Anxiety becomes constant. And more income becomes the only visible solution. So you chase raises, promotions, bonuses, but the loop never changes, because the problem isn't the amount, it's the delivery mechanism. Salary teaches you to live inside a funnel. Money enters slowly, exits quickly, never accumulates, never stabilizes, and because it feels normal, you don't question it. Now let's talk about why salary is so effective at controlling behavior. Salary creates dependency without ownership. You don't own the source. You don't control the timing. You don't control the continuation. You rent your income, and rented income creates fear. Fear of disruption, fear of saying no, fear of stepping out of line. This is why high-income earners often feel more trapped than low-income earners, because the higher the salary, the heavier the lifestyle. And the heavier the lifestyle, the tighter the leash. Now let's expose something few people admit. A raise feels good for about 3 months. Then it disappears. Not because you're irresponsible, not because you're bad with money, but because salary activates automatic expansion. Your standards adjust, your tolerance shifts, your normal recalibrates upward. New restaurants, better clothes, bigger commitments, more comfort. And suddenly, your new income feels normal. The stress remains. This is why people making 6 figures still live paycheck to paycheck. Not because they're reckless, because salary trained spending faster than discipline can keep up. Now, let's talk about banks, because this is where the system reveals itself. Banks love salaried people, not entrepreneurs, not risk takers, not cash flow builders, salaried people. Why? Because salary is predictable. Predictable income means predictable debt payments. Predictable debt payments mean long-term compliance. Your stable income becomes leverage for them. Mortgages, auto loans, credit lines, lifestyle financing. Every product is designed around one assumption: you will keep showing up. And as long as you do, the system works beautifully for everyone except you. Now let's pause for a moment. Ask yourself this question honestly. If your salary stopped tomorrow, how long would your life continue unchanged? Not survival, not I'd figure it out. Unchanged. That answer tells you everything. Because wealth is not about how long you can survive without income. It's about how long you can live without pressure. Salary rarely provides that. Now let's address the most dangerous illusion of all. I'm safe because I have a good job. A job is not safety, it's permission. permission that can be revoked, restructured, replaced. And when your entire financial life is built on permission, you are exposed no matter how high the income. This is why people with impressive careers still feel anxious. They sense the fragility. Now here's the key distinction this audiobook is built on. Salary is income. Cash flow is power. Salary depends on presence. Cash flow depends on structure. Salary stops when you stop. Cash flow continues. Salary demands obedience. Cash flow creates options. And once you feel the difference, your relationship with money changes permanently. In the next chapter, we're going to break down why high income actually delays wealth for most people, and how earning more can push freedom further away instead of closer. This is where the story gets uncomfortable, because the thing you're chasing might be the very thing keeping you stuck. Dear viewers, write which city you're from. It's interesting to see which corners of the world are watching our videos. Chapter 3, Why High Income Delays Wealth. More money should mean more freedom. That's the promise. But for most people, higher income does the opposite. It delays freedom. It deepens dependency. It tightens the system around them. And it does this quietly, without resistance. Here's the uncomfortable truth. High income doesn't solve financial stress. It camouflages it. When income is low, pressure is obvious. When income is high, pressure becomes sophisticated. Better packaging, better excuses, better distractions. But the underlying structure stays the same. You still trade time for money. You still depend on one source. You still need the next deposit to maintain your life. Only now, the stakes are higher. Now let's talk about why earning more often pushes wealth further away. High income accelerates commitment speed. As income rises, so does confidence, and confidence invites permanence. Longer leases, bigger mortgages, higher insurance tiers, more lifestyle automation. You don't pause to ask, does this increase my freedom? You ask, can I afford it? And affordability is a trap question, because affordability ignores future pressure. Just because you can afford something today doesn't mean it won't own you tomorrow. High income gives you access to better cages. Now let's talk about lifestyle inflation, not as a bad habit, but as a biological response. Your brain adapts fast. What once felt luxurious becomes normal. What once felt optional becomes expected. This is called hedonic adaptation. But in money, adaptation is dangerous because every new normal requires maintenance. Maintenance demands income. Income demands compliance. And suddenly, your higher income hasn't freed you. It has raised the floor beneath you and lowered the ceiling above you. Now let's talk about a hard truth. The fastest way to stay broke is to upgrade everything except your structure. Most people upgrade their lifestyle. Few upgrade their financial architecture. They buy better things, but don't buy time. They increase income, but don't reduce dependency. They optimize spending, but don't redesign cash flow. So the system wins. Now let's talk about the emotional side of high income. High earners experience a unique anxiety, not fear of poverty, fear of collapse, because they know how much is required to maintain their life. They feel the weight of expectations, family expectations, social expectations, self-imposed standards. They can't downshift easily. They can't stop easily. They can't rest easily. So they stay in motion, busy, productive, stressed. And stress becomes normal. This is why people with high incomes often say, I don't feel rich. Because richness is not a number. It's a nervous system state. Now let's introduce the concept that changes everything. Rich people don't chase income. They protect gaps. Gaps between income and expenses, effort and reward, time spent and value produced. These gaps create breathing room, and breathing room is where power lives. Salary collapses gaps. Your income is matched to your lifestyle. Your effort is matched to your pay. Your time is fully allocated, no space, no buffer, no leverage. Cash flow expands gaps. Money arrives independent of your hours. Expenses don't rise at the same speed. Time regains flexibility. That gap is the difference between panic and patience. Now let's talk about why people resist this idea. Because salary is visible. Cash flow is quiet. Salary earns applause. Cash flow earns silence. You can explain a job. You can explain a raise. You can't easily explain systems that work in the background, and humans crave validation. So they chase visible success, even when invisible freedom is available. Now here's a sentence that should stop you. If your income rises, but your dependence stays the same, you are not getting richer. You are just moving faster inside the same cage. Now pause. Think about your last raise, your last bonus, your last income jump. Did your sense of freedom increase, or did your commitments quietly expand to meet it? That answer matters, because in the next chapter, we're going to shift from income to cash flow and explain why cash flow changes not just your finances, but your psychology, why it calms your nervous system, why it slows your decisions, why it gives you patience others don't have. And once you feel that difference, salary will never look the same again. Dear viewer, we strive to create high-quality videos for you. Please assist us in improving our efforts by commenting on what you like about the video and what you would change or add. We would be very grateful. Chapter 4. Cash flow changes your brain. There is a moment most people never experience, not because it's rare, but because salary keeps them from ever reaching it. It's the moment when money stops shouting, when you're no longer reacting to every expense, when decisions slow down, when urgency loosens its grip on your nervous system. That moment does not come from earning more. It comes from cash flow. And until you feel it, you don't understand how deeply salary has been shaping your thoughts. Here is the truth most people never articulate. Salary creates emotional money. Cash flow creates neutral money. Salary money feels fragile. You attach emotion to it because it represents effort, hours, sacrifice, time you can't get back. So when you spend salary money, your body reacts. Tension, guilt, justification, even when you can afford it. Cash flow money feels different. It arrives without you being present, without you negotiating, without you proving anything. And because it didn't cost you today, your brain doesn't cling to it the same way. That emotional shift changes everything. Now let's talk about why this matters. Most bad financial decisions are not logical. They're emotional, impulse spending, overcommitting, staying too long in bad situations. These decisions happen under pressure, and pressure is highest when income is fragile. Salary is fragile by design. It requires consistency, availability, permission. Miss work, arrow, lose money, arrow, lose stability. Your brain knows this, even if you don't consciously think about it. So it stays alert, reactive, anxious. That anxiety shapes choices. Now compare that to cash flow. Even a small cash flow, modest, boring, unimpressive, changes the equation. Because now, not all money depends on you. There is separation. And separation creates calm. Calm creates patience. Patience creates better decisions. Better decisions compound. This is the psychological advantage of cash flow, not the financial one. Now let's talk about a mistake people make. They think cash flow means huge passive income, properties, businesses, complex systems. That belief delays action. Cash flow starts much smaller. It starts when money arrives, that is, not tied to hours today, not dependent on mood, not dependent on immediate effort. Even a small amount rewires perception because your brain stops seeing money as survival fuel and starts seeing it as a tool. Now let's talk about the salary brain. The salary brain asks, can I afford this? What if something happens? What if income stops? The cash flow brain asks, what does this build? What does this free up? What does this reduce long-term pressure? Same person, different structure. That's why mindset advice fails. You can't think your way out of a salary trap. You have to structure your way out. Now, let's talk about fear again. Fear doesn't disappear with cash flow. It changes shape. It becomes strategic. You're no longer afraid of missing a paycheck. You're aware of opportunity cost. You're no longer reacting. You're choosing. This is why people with cash flow move slower and win more often. They're not rushed. Now here's a sentence that matters. Cash flow gives you the power to wait, and waiting is one of the most underrated forms of wealth. When you can wait, you don't accept bad deals, you don't chase status, you don't panic buy solutions, you let opportunities come to you. Salary removes the ability to wait. Bills don't wait. Commitments don't wait. Lifestyle doesn't wait. So you rush. Now pause for a moment. Think about your last big financial decision. Was it rushed, emotionally charged, driven by timing? That's salary pressure talking. Now imagine making the same decision, knowing that some money arrives whether you act today or not. Feel the difference? That feeling is the beginning of freedom. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about why banks, employers, and institutions prefer salary over cash flow, and why the system quietly discourages you from ever building it. Because once you understand who benefits from salary dependence, the entire financial world looks very different. Hang on a sec. Hey there. Dear viewers, write in the comments what you'd like us to talk about in the next video. We promise to read all the comments and pick the best and most relevant topics. Thanks. Chapter 5. Why the system prefers you on salary. There is a reason salary is everywhere, a reason it's normalized, a reason it's celebrated, a reason it's defended as security. It's not because salary is best for you. It's because salary is predictable for everyone else. Here is the truth most people never consider. Salary is the most efficient way to control human behavior without force. When income arrives only if you show up, follow rules, and stay inside boundaries, obedience becomes automatic. Not because you're weak, because you're human. Now let's talk about employers. Employers love salary because it stabilizes labor. Fixed hours, fixed expectations, fixed costs. They don't want workers who can walk away calmly. They want workers who need consistency. Need creates compliance. Compliance creates leverage for them. Now let's talk about banks. Banks do not care how smart you are. They care how predictable you are. Salary makes you predictable. It tells them when money arrives, how long it has arrived before, how likely it is to continue. This is why salaried people get approved easily. Not because they're wealthy, because they're controllable. Debt requires obedience over time. Salary guarantees it. Cash flow complicates this. Cash flow is irregular, decentralized, harder to forecast. And uncertainty is bad for institutions. So cash flow is framed as risky, unstable, irresponsible, even when it produces far more control for the individual. Now let's talk about governments. Taxes are easier to collect from salary. Regulations are easier to enforce. Behavior is easier to monitor. Salary centralizes economic activity. Cash flow decentralizes it. And systems prefer centralization. Now pause. Ask yourself, who benefits when your income depends on permission? Not you. Now let's talk about the psychological contract. Salary creates a silent agreement. I'll behave. You'll pay me. We'll repeat. Breaking that agreement feels wrong, even when it's harming you. This is why people feel guilt even thinking about stepping outside salary. That guilt is trained. Now let's talk about the word risk again. Risk is used as a deterrent. Cash flow is risky. Entrepreneurship is risky. Investments are risky. But salary risk is hidden. Layoffs, reorganizations, industry shifts, burnout, health issues. All risk delayed. Salary doesn't remove risk, it postpones it. And postponed risk compounds silently. Now let's talk about something uncomfortable. Most people believe salary is safer because it spreads responsibility. If something goes wrong, it's not your fault. That emotional buffer feels good. Cash flow removes that buffer. Responsibility returns to you. And responsibility feels heavy until you realize what it gives you. Control. Now here's the critical distinction. Salary removes responsibility in exchange for dependence. Cash flow increases responsibility in exchange for freedom. You can't have both. Now let's talk about why people stay. Because salary gives you identity, titles, roles, status. Cash flow gives you outcomes, not labels. And labels feel safer than ambiguity. So people cling to roles even when outcomes are poor. Now, let's talk about the moment things shift. It's not when cash flow replaces salary. It's when cash flow supplements salary. That's the crack in the system. The moment not all money depends on permission, your leverage changes, your posture changes, your tone changes, your patience changes. You stop chasing approval unconsciously, and that is dangerous to the system. Now pause. Imagine how you would negotiate if you weren't afraid of losing everything. How you would say no. How you would slow down. How you would choose differently. That's the power salary keeps from you. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about why saving alone will never make you rich, and how the advice you were given about money was designed for safety, not sovereignty. This is where traditional financial wisdom starts to collapse. If your life changed 100% in your favor this year, what would be the first sign? Describe it. Chapter 6. Why saving alone keeps you stuck. Saving feels responsible. That's why it's dangerous when misunderstood. You were told, save your money, build an emergency fund, be disciplined, and all of that is good advice. But it's incomplete. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Saving protects you from emergencies. It does not free you from dependence. Saving stabilizes survival. It does not change structure. And structure is what determines freedom. Now let's talk about how saving is framed. Saving is defensive. It assumes income will continue. Expenses are fixed. Risk comes from emergencies. So you prepare for disruption, without questioning why disruption would be catastrophic in the first place. You don't redesign the system. You pad it. That padding feels reassuring until you realize what saving actually does. Saving extends your ability to stay inside the salary trap. It gives you a longer runway. but keeps the same destination. Now let's talk about the illusion of safety. People with savings feel safe until something structural happens. Layoffs, industry shifts, health issues, economic shocks. Savings buy time. They do not buy leverage. Time runs out. Leverage compounds. That's the difference. Now let's talk about the advice you were given. Most financial advice is written for people who will never escape salary dependence. It focuses on budgeting, saving percentages, retirement accounts, long-term compliance, all useful, none transformative. Because the goal of that advice is not sovereignty, it's stability, and stability is not freedom. Now let's talk about retirement specifically. Retirement is sold as the reward. Work hard for decades. Save diligently. Enjoy later. This delays life. It tells you freedom is something you earn after your best years are spent. Cash flow thinking rejects this. It asks, how can money reduce pressure now? How can income arrive without waiting decades? Not irresponsibly, strategically. Now let's talk about inflation, because this is where saving quietly loses power. Saved money that doesn't grow shrinks over time. Your discipline is punished invisibly. You did everything right and still fall behind. That creates frustration, confusion, distrust, and people blame themselves. But the problem was never discipline. It was direction. Now let's talk about the hierarchy of money use. Salary thinking says, earn to save to spend to repeat. Cash flow thinking says, earn to build to generate to reinvest. Saving is a pause. Cash flow is a loop. Loops compound. Pauses don't. Now let's talk about fear again. People cling to saving because it feels controllable. You can see the number. You can track progress. You can feel prepared. Cash flow feels abstract at first, delayed, uncertain, messy. And humans prefer visible certainty over invisible compounding. That preference keeps people stuck. Now, here's the sentence that reframes everything. Saving without cash flow is just delayed vulnerability. You're safer today, but still exposed tomorrow. Now pause, look at your savings, ask yourself, if income stopped permanently, what would this allow me to do differently? Not survive. Live differently. If the answer is not much, you've identified the limit of saving. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about cash flow myths, the lies that stop people from ever building it, why they think it's too risky, too complex, too late, and why those beliefs are far more dangerous than the risks they're trying to avoid. Chapter 7. The cash flow myths that keep you stuck. Most people don't reject cash flow because they've tried it and failed. They reject it because of stories. Stories they absorbed without questioning. Stories repeated by people who never built it. Stories designed to keep behavior predictable. These stories sound responsible, logical, mature, but they quietly protect the salary system. Let's dismantle them one by one. Myth 1. Cash flow is too risky. This is the most powerful lie of all, because it compares visible risk to hidden risk. Cash flow risk is obvious. It looks uncertain, irregular, unfamiliar. Salary risk is invisible. It's delayed, distributed, normalized. You're taught to fear what you can see and ignore what you can't. But let's be honest. What is riskier? A system where income depends on one employer, expenses are fixed, failure is sudden, or a system where income comes from multiple streams, expenses are adjustable, failure is gradual, salary concentrates risk, cash flow spreads it. The only difference is timing. Now let's talk about the second myth. Cash flow is only for entrepreneurs. This belief is convenient for the system because it frames ownership as extreme. All or nothing. Quit your job, take massive risks, burn bridges. That's not how real cash flow is built. Cash flow begins as supplemental, not dominant. It starts small, unimpressive, almost boring. A side system, a tiny asset, a skill applied outside your job. The goal is not replacement, it's separation. Separation between effort and income. Now the third myth. I don't have enough money to build cash flow. This one sounds practical. It feels rational. But it hides a deeper truth. Most people don't lack money. They lack margin. Their income is allocated before it arrives. Lifestyle commitments, debt obligations, automatic spending, so it feels like there's nothing left to build with. But here's the reframe. Cash flow doesn't start with spare money. It starts with spare capacity. Unused skills, unused time, unused leverage. Money is only one input, and often the least important one. Now let's talk about the fourth myth. It's too late. This is the quietest myth and the most destructive. It uses age as an excuse for inaction. But age is not the problem. Time horizon is. People who say it's too late are usually comparing themselves to unrealistic timelines. Overnight success stories, compressed narratives, edited outcomes. Cash flow is not a sprint. It's a gradual transfer of dependence, and gradual change is available at any age. Now let's talk about the final myth. I'll focus on cash flow after I'm stable. This one sounds responsible, it sounds patient, but stability without leverage just deepens dependence. Waiting for stability often means waiting forever, because salary stability encourages more commitments, more responsibility, more pressure, less flexibility. Cash flow must be built during stability, not after. Now let's talk about the emotional reason these myths persist. Cash flow threatens identity. It shifts you from employee to builder, participant to designer, reactive to proactive. That transition feels uncomfortable because it removes excuses. You can no longer blame the system entirely. You regain agency. And agency is scary when you've been trained to seek permission. Now here's the sentence that cuts through all myths. Cash flow is not about money. It's about optionality. Options to wait, options to say no, options to pivot, and options are what salary removes. Now pause. Which myth have you been using unconsciously? Risk? Timing? Money? Identity? Naming it weakens it. In the next chapter, we're going to get practical, not with tactics, not with hype, but with the first structural shift that changes everything. Learning to separate income from effort without burning your life down. This is where theory becomes architecture. Chapter 8, Separating Income from Effort Without Burning Your Life Down. Most people hear separate income from effort and immediately panic. They imagine quitting, risk, instability, chaos. That fear keeps them frozen. So let's slow this down, because separation does not mean escape overnight. It means decoupling gradually. Here is the truth. You don't destroy the salary bridge. You build another bridge beside it, and you only cross when it can hold your weight. The mistake people make is thinking separation is a leap. It's not. It's a shift in how value is created. Now let's talk about effort. Salary rewards linear effort. 1 hour to 1 unit of pay. Stop working to stop earning. This is simple, predictable, limited. Cash flow rewards non-linear effort. You work once. Value repeats, not forever, not magically, but longer than the effort itself. That's the separation. Now let's talk about the first step, because this is where people overcomplicate things. The first step is not an investment, not a business, not a side hustle. The first step is auditing where effort is currently trapped. Ask yourself, what am I doing right now that produces value only once? Skills, knowledge, processes, judgment. Most people use powerful capabilities inside narrow containers. Their job. They give away leverage in exchange for predictability. Now here's the reframe. You don't need a new skill. You need a new container. The same ability applied in a structure that repeats. Now let's talk about time, because time is the real constraint. People say, I don't have time. What they mean is, all my time is pre-sold. Salary pre-sells your best hours. That's okay, at first. But separation requires protected time. Not more time. Protected time. Time that is non-negotiable, small, consistent. Not evenings of exhaustion. Not weekends of resentment. Tiny windows, used deliberately. This is how builders operate. Now let's talk about money again. You do not fund separation with lifestyle money. That's how people self-sabotage. You fund separation with margin money. Money that does not change your life if lost. Money that does not threaten stability. This keeps fear low. Decision quality high. Now, let's talk about expectations. Separation does not pay quickly. And that's the point. If it paid fast, everyone would do it. The early phase feels inefficient. Effort without feedback. Work without validation. Progress without applause. This is where most people quit, because salary trained them to expect immediate exchange. Cash flow demands delayed exchange. Now, let's talk about a crucial mindset shift. You are not trying to make money at first. You are trying to reduce dependence. Those are not the same goal. The first cash flow win is not a big payment. It's psychological relief. The moment you realize not all money depends on tomorrow, that moment changes behavior. Now let's talk about restraint. Do not scale too early. Do not optimize too fast. Do not chase growth before stability. Growth amplifies structure. If the structure is fragile, growth breaks it. Builders strengthen foundations quietly. Now pause, ask yourself, what is one small way I could allow effort today to produce value tomorrow? Not forever, not passively, just once more than today. That question is the doorway. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about why keeping cash in the bank feels smart but quietly erodes power, and what cash is actually supposed to do for you. This is where conventional wisdom starts failing completely. Chapter 9. Why cash in the bank makes you feel safe but keeps you weak. Cash in the bank feels like security. You see the number. You feel prepared. You breathe easier. And that feeling is exactly why most people stop there. But here's the truth. No one explains clearly. Cash that only sits is not protection. It's paused potential. And over time, paused potential turns into erosion. Now let's be clear before we go any further. Emergency cash matters. Liquidity matters. Buffer matters. This is not about recklessness. This is about misunderstanding what cash is for. Cash is not the destination. Cash is a tool. And tools that aren't used don't protect you. They decay. Now let's talk about the illusion of safety. When cash sits idle, your brain relaxes. You feel covered. But underneath that feeling, two quiet things are happening. First, inflation is eating purchasing power. Slowly, silently, relentlessly. Second, opportunity cost is compounding. Every day cash sits unused, it is not building leverage. You are safer short-term, weaker long-term. Now let's talk about why banks encourage this. Banks want your cash idle. Idle cash becomes their leverage. They lend it. They deploy it. They earn from it. You earn peace of mind. They earn growth. This is not evil, it's structural, but it means your strategy cannot stop at saving. Now let's talk about emotional attachment to cash. Salary trains you to cling to cash because cash represents time already spent, effort already given, energy already drained, so you guard it. Cash flow thinking changes this relationship. Cash becomes transitional. It arrives. It gets assigned a job. It moves, not recklessly, deliberately. Now here's the key reframe. Cash is not wealth. Cash is inventory. Inventory exists to be deployed, not hoarded, not worshipped, used. Now let's talk about fear again. People fear deploying cash because loss feels personal, and that fear is understandable. But ask yourself this: is the goal to avoid loss or to reduce dependence? Those goals sometimes conflict. Avoiding all risk guarantees permanent dependence. Now let's talk about control. True safety doesn't come from how much cash you have. It comes from how many options cash can create. Options to wait, options to pivot, options to invest, options to survive disruptions without panic. Idle cash creates fewer options than deployed cash. Once you understand deployment. Now let's talk about the mistake people make. They jump from hoarding to gambling, all in investments, speculation, emotion-driven moves. That's not deployment. That's reaction. Deployment is structured, measured, intentional. It asks, what reduces future pressure? What increases flexibility? What builds repeatable value? Now pause. Look at your savings, not with pride, not with shame, with curiosity. Ask, what job is this cash doing right now? If the only answer is making me feel better, that's not wrong, but it's incomplete. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about how wealthy people think about cash differently, not as a comfort blanket, but as a strategic lever. This is where the gap between earners and builders becomes impossible to ignore. The topic of this video was chosen by you, our viewers. In most of our videos, we remind you that you can write interesting topics you would like to hear about in the comments. We take the most interesting ones into consideration. Today's video topic was suggested by one of our viewers in the comments. John Doe, thank you for this theme. If you want us to cover a topic that interests you, write it in the comments. This will help us make videos on topics that are interesting to you, our viewers. Chapter 10. How the Rich Think About Cash. The biggest difference between people who feel rich and people who merely earn well is not intelligence. It's not discipline. It's how cash is perceived the moment it arrives. Most people see cash as relief. Wealthy thinkers see cash as a decision waiting to be made. That single shift changes everything. Now let's slow this down. When salary money hits your account, your body relaxes. Bills feel manageable. Stress fades. You exhale. That emotional response is the trap. Because the moment relief arrives, thinking shuts down. Cash flow thinkers don't relax when money arrives. They focus. They ask, what is this money supposed to do? Not today, not emotionally, but structurally. Now let's talk about the most misunderstood habit of wealthy people. They don't hoard cash. They stage it. Cash sits temporarily, waiting for assignment. Every dollar has a job. Reduce future pressure. Increase future flexibility. Create future inflow. If cash doesn't do one of those three things, it's considered idle. And idle is unacceptable, even when the balance looks impressive. Now let's talk about timing. Wealthy thinkers do not deploy cash impulsively. They wait. But waiting is not fear. It's patience, backed by options. They can wait, because they are not under pressure. Salary dependence destroys patience. When bills demand urgency, you make rushed decisions. When cash flow reduces urgency, you can afford to say, "Not yet." This is why wealthy people appear calm during chaos. They built structures that absorb shocks. Now let's talk about leverage again. Leverage is misunderstood. It's not borrowing recklessly. It's not maximizing risk. Leverage is using resources so effort multiplies. Cash is one of those resources, but only if you treat it as a lever, not a trophy. Now let's talk about the rule wealthy thinkers live by. Cash should either be protecting time or buying it back. Protecting time means emergency buffers, flexibility during downturns, freedom to wait. Buying time back means systems, tools, assets, delegation. If cash is not doing one of these, it's failing its purpose. Now let's talk about emotion again. Wealthy thinkers work hard to remove emotion from cash decisions, not because they're cold, but because emotion creates inconsistency. Consistency compounds. Emotion spikes and crashes. This is why wealthy people appear boring decisions, repeated endlessly, quietly effective. Now pause. Think about the last time you received money. What was your first instinct? Relief? Reward? Spending? Celebration? None of those are wrong, but none of them build power. Power comes from assignment. Now here's the sentence that matters most in this chapter. Cash is not a reward for past effort. It is a resource for future freedom. Once you internalize that, you stop thinking like an earner. You start thinking like a builder. In the next chapter, we're going to expose the illusion of financial intelligence, why smart people still stay broke, and how intelligence without structure becomes a liability. This is where ego quietly sabotages progress. Friend, write your opinion on this topic in the comments. Do you agree with us or not? I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Chapter 11. Why smart people still stay broke. Intelligence is not the advantage people think it is. In fact, intelligence often becomes a liability because smart people learn faster but hesitate longer. They analyze, they compare, they overthink, and while they're thinking, structure keeps winning. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Financial intelligence without structural change just makes you better at explaining why nothing changes. Smart people know about budgeting. They understand interest rates. They read about investing. They follow markets. And yet, they're still dependent, still anxious, still paycheck sensitive, still reacting. Why? Because intelligence is rewarded inside the salary system, but punished outside it. Now let's talk about how intelligence gets trapped. Smart people are good at optimizing. They find better ways to budget, save, reduce expenses, maximize rewards. Optimization feels productive, but optimization inside a broken structure only makes the structure more efficient at controlling you. You become a high-functioning dependent. Now let's talk about ego. Smart people often identify with being responsible. They don't want to look reckless. They don't want to fail publicly. They don't want to admit ignorance. So they wait until they feel certain. Certainty never comes. Cash flow requires action under uncertainty, not blind action, but imperfect action. And smart people struggle with imperfection. Now let's talk about information overload. The smarter you are, the more information you consume. And information feels like progress, even when nothing changes. You know more, you understand more, but your structure stays the same. That creates frustration. So you consume more information, and the loop continues. Now let's talk about credentials, degrees, certifications, titles. These create confidence inside institutions, but often weaken confidence outside them. You're trained to succeed in systems, not design them. That's why many highly educated people feel lost when asked to build independently. Not because they lack ability, but because they were never trained for ownership. Now, let's talk about risk perception. Smart people are good at identifying downside. They see what could go wrong. They calculate probabilities. They imagine worst-case scenarios. That skill is valuable, but only when paired with asymmetric upside. Salary has capped upside. Cash flow does not. Smart people often avoid small risks that carry massive long-term upside. They protect against losses, but never give themselves the chance to win. Now here's the critical insight. Smart people stay broke longer because they confuse understanding with control. Understanding money does not give you control over it. Structure does. Now pause. Ask yourself honestly, have I been learning more instead of building differently? Have I been optimizing habits instead of redesigning systems? That awareness matters, because in the next chapter, we're going to talk about how to build cash flow without becoming reckless or obsessive, how to do it calmly, deliberately, and in a way that actually reduces stress instead of increasing it. This is where balance returns. Dear viewers, please write in the comments what assets you buy or are interested in. Perhaps these are stocks, or maybe cryptocurrency. It is interesting to see how you structure your investment portfolio. Also, please write what you think about real estate. Is it still relevant to buy flats today? Chapter 12. Building cash flow without losing your life. One of the biggest fears people have about cash flow is that it will consume them, that it will turn into obsession, overwork. Another job disguised as freedom. That fear is valid, because many people build cash flow the wrong way. They replace one dependency with another, one burnout with a different burnout, one boss with many invisible ones. That's not freedom. That's lateral movement. So let's clarify something important. Cash flow is only freedom if it reduces pressure, not increases it. If it adds stress, complexity, and urgency, you've built it wrong. Now let's talk about the calm way to build cash flow. Not fast, not flashy, calm. The first principle is containment. Cash flow should live in a box, with boundaries, with limits. It should not invade every hour of your life. If your side system requires constant attention, constant reaction, constant emotional energy, it's not leverage, it's another salary. Now let's talk about time again. Cash flow is not built by working more hours. It's built by working differently. You look for effort that repeats, scales, transfers. Effort that doesn't require your presence every time. Now let's talk about emotional cost. Many people build income streams that destroy peace. They chase volatility, drama, constant decision-making. That's not power. Power feels boring. It feels stable, predictable, quiet. Now let's talk about the rule that protects sanity. If cash flow requires urgency, it's fragile. Fragile systems demand attention. Strong systems absorb pressure. Now let's talk about sequencing. You don't stack 10 income streams. You stabilize one. Then you layer. Most people scatter effort. Builders concentrate it. Now let's talk about patience again. Cash flow built calmly grows slowly at first, and that slowness is a filter. It removes impulsive builders. It rewards consistency. This is where salary-trained minds struggle. because they expect immediate feedback. Cash flow pays later, and later pays better. Now let's talk about sustainability. Ask yourself, can I maintain this system during a bad week, a bad month? If the answer is no, the system is too fragile. Simplify. Now pause. Take inventory. Is the way you imagine cash flow exciting or calming? Excitement fades. Calm compounds. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about why freedom feels uncomfortable at first, and why many people sabotage cash flow the moment it starts working. This is where psychology becomes the real challenge. Chapter 13. Why freedom feels uncomfortable. At first, freedom is supposed to feel good. That's what everyone believes. But the truth is quieter and more unsettling. Freedom feels unstable before it feels empowering. And that discomfort is why many people sabotage it the moment it starts working. Let's talk about why. Salary creates certainty, not real certainty. Emotional certainty. You know when money arrives. You know what's expected. You know who decides. That predictability calms the nervous system even when it limits your life. Cash flow removes that structure, and when structure disappears, your brain panics. Not because you're unsafe, but because you're unfamiliar. This is the paradox. The more free you become, the less external guidance you have. No schedule imposed, no authority watching, no immediate consequences. That silence can feel terrifying. Now let's talk about self-sabotage. People build cash flow, small but real, and then unconsciously destroy it. They overspend, they overcommit, they abandon consistency. Why? Because freedom creates responsibility, and responsibility exposes uncertainty. Now let's talk about the identity shock. If you've spent years defining yourself by your job, your income, your productivity, cash flow creates a void. Who are you when no one tells you what to do? That question scares people more than poverty, because poverty at least gives direction. Now let's talk about the craving for urgency. Salary trains urgency, deadlines, meetings, targets. Urgency gives life rhythm. Cash flow slows things down, and slow can feel empty at first. So people reintroduce chaos just to feel productive again. This is why many people fail after early success. They mistake discomfort for danger. Now let's talk about patience again. Freedom requires internal structure. You must decide when to work, what matters, when to stop. Those decisions are tiring at first, but they're also empowering. Over time, your nervous system adapts. Calm becomes normal. Urgency fades. Clarity replaces anxiety. Now let's talk about the key shift. Freedom is not the absence of effort. It's the presence of choice. And choice feels heavy until you learn to carry it. Now pause. If chapter of you feels uneasy, imagining a life with less pressure, that's not weakness. That's conditioning. Awareness is the first step. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about how to lock in cash flow gains, how to prevent regression, protect progress, and build a system that survives mood, doubt, and distraction. This is where discipline meets design. Chapter 14. Locking in cash flow so it doesn't disappear. Most people don't lose progress because they fail. They lose it because they drift. No collapse, no crisis, just slow erosion. Cash flow starts working and then quietly stops. Not because the idea was wrong, but because the system wasn't protected. So let's talk about how to lock in gains. Because building cash flow is one challenge. Keeping it alive through boredom, doubt, and distraction is the real one. Here's the core truth. Anything that depends on motivation will eventually fail. Motivation fluctuates. mood shifts, energy dips. Systems survive. Motivation doesn't. Now let's talk about the first lock. Automation. If cash flow requires you to remember, remind, or constantly redecide, it's fragile. The goal is not passive. The goal is automatic. Even small automation reduces friction. Less friction means fewer excuses. Fewer excuses means consistency. Consistency compounds. Now let's talk about boundaries. Cash flow that grows without boundaries starts demanding attention, more messages, more decisions, more urgency. That's where people lose peace. So you must decide in advance what you will not do, what you will not scale, what you will not sacrifice. Freedom is protected by limits. Now let's talk about reinvestment. This is where many people regress. They experience cash flow, then spend it emotionally. Rewards, lifestyle upgrades, celebration spending. Nothing wrong with enjoyment. But premature consumption slows compounding. The early phase requires restraint. Not forever, just long enough. Now let's talk about identity again. If your identity is still tied to earning, you will unconsciously sabotage systems that reduce effort. Because chapter of you believes effort equals worth. Cash flow challenges that belief. So expect internal resistance. Expect doubt. This doesn't mean stop. It means normalize discomfort. Now let's talk about redundancy. One cash flow stream is relief. 2 is stability. 3 is power. Redundancy reduces fear. Fear causes bad decisions. But redundancy should come after stability, not before. Now let's talk about review. Most people don't review systems. They react to them, set checkpoints monthly, quarterly. Ask, is this reducing pressure? Is this increasing flexibility? Is this worth maintaining? If not, simplify. Now pause. Think about what would happen if you did nothing dramatic, just protected what already works. That quiet protection is how builders win. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about what financial freedom actually looks like in real life. Not fantasy, not luxury, but lived experience. Because freedom is simpler than most people expect and harder to accept. Chapter 15. What financial freedom actually looks like. Financial freedom does not look like Instagram. It doesn't look like constant travel. It doesn't look like luxury everywhere. It doesn't look like never working again. That fantasy keeps people chasing the wrong thing and missing the real prize. Here's the truth most people never hear. Financial freedom feels quiet. No rush, no panic, no emotional spikes tied to money. You wake up without checking balances. You make decisions without fear underneath them. You plan weeks and months ahead without tension. That calm is the signal. Now let's talk about what actually changes. First, time regains flexibility. You don't need to optimize every hour. You don't need to say yes to everything. You don't feel guilty resting because money is no longer tied directly to your presence today. That separation is subtle, but it rewires your behavior. Now let's talk about work. You don't stop working. You stop tolerating meaningless work. You choose projects more carefully. You walk away faster. You protect energy. Work becomes selective. That selectivity is power. Now let's talk about money again. Money stops feeling emotional. It's no longer tied to self-worth, no longer tied to fear, no longer tied to urgency. It becomes a tool, and tools don't control the user. Now let's talk about stress. Stress doesn't disappear, but it changes source. You're no longer stressed about survival. You're occasionally stressed about optimization. That's a good trade. Now let's talk about lifestyle. Freedom does not require extravagance. It requires margin. margin in time, margin in money, margin in attention. Most people chase upgrades. Free people protect margins. Now, let's talk about relationships. Money-related tension fades. You don't argue about small expenses. You don't feel pressure to impress. You don't stay in situations out of fear. Your standards rise quietly. Now let's talk about something unexpected. Freedom makes you slower, not lazy, intentional. You pause before commitments. You think before reacting. You choose before acting. Speed was never the advantage. Patience was. Now pause. If this version of freedom feels underwhelming, that's conditioning talking. Drama is addictive. Calm feels strange. But calm is where real life happens. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about why most people never reach this point, even when they earn enough, and the single habit that keeps them trapped right before freedom. This is the final psychological barrier. Chapter 16, the last habit that keeps people broke. Right before freedom, most people self-sabotage. Not dramatically, not intentionally, quietly. They do everything right, and then revert to the one habit that kept them dependent all along. Here it is. They increase their lifestyle the moment pressure decreases. This habit is invisible, socially praised, emotionally justified, and it destroys progress faster than any bad investment. Let's talk about why. When cash flow starts working, pressure lifts. Bills feel lighter. Time feels more flexible. Anxiety fades, and the brain wants to celebrate, not with rest, with upgrades, better car, better place, better experiences, more commitments. It feels earned, and it is. But it's also dangerous, because lifestyle expansion reintroduces pressure, quietly. Now let's talk about the pattern. Pressure to build to relief, to expand to pressure, returns. The cycle repeats, even with higher income and more sophistication. This is why people hover near freedom for years without crossing it. They treat relief as permission instead of opportunity. Now let's talk about the belief underneath. Many people believe, if I don't upgrade now, what was the point? But that belief misunderstands the point. The point was not consumption. The point was optionality. Now let's talk about wealthy behavior again. Wealthy people delay lifestyle expansion, not because they're cheap, because they're strategic. They wait until cash flow is stable, redundancy exists, pressure remains low after upgrades. They upgrade from surplus, not relief. That distinction matters. Now let's talk about the emotional challenge. Restraint feels unfair after effort, especially if you've delayed gratification for years. But here's the reframe. The final restraint is the one that buys permanent freedom. Short-term enjoyment versus long-term independence. Now let's talk about the single habit that replaces lifestyle inflation. Lifestyle neutrality. As cash flow grows, your lifestyle stays mostly the same. Not forever, just long enough. That gap between what you earn and how you live is where freedom locks in. Now pause. Ask yourself honestly, if pressure in my life decreased tomorrow, what would I immediately upgrade? That answer tells you where freedom leaks. Now let's talk about discipline again, but the quiet kind, not forcing, not deprivation, just delayed expansion. Let the system stabilize. Let cash flow repeat. Let redundancy form. Then expand intentionally. Now here's the sentence that ends this chapter. Most people don't fail to build wealth. They fail to hold it long enough for it to harden. Hardening takes time. In the final chapter, we're going to bring everything together, not with tactics, not with rules, but with a clear picture of what it means to live permanently outside the salary trap and how to stay there for life. Chapter 17. Living permanently outside the salary trap. There is a moment when something clicks, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. You stop thinking in paychecks. You stop counting down to deposits. You stop structuring your life around permission. And from the outside, almost nothing looks different. You still work. You still earn. You still participate in the world. But internally, everything has shifted. Because you are no longer living inside the salary trap. You are standing outside it, choosing how close you want to stand. This is what permanent escape actually looks like. Not quitting work, not rejecting income, not pretending money doesn't matter. It's decoupling identity, survival, and time from salary. Now let's talk about what changes first. Your thinking slows down. You no longer make decisions to relieve pressure. You make decisions to preserve alignment. You ask different questions. Does this increase or reduce dependence? Does this add optionality or obligation? Does this buy time or consume it? These questions become automatic, not because you memorize them, but because your structure trained you. Now let's talk about work again. Outside the salary trap, work becomes selective. You don't chase raises blindly. You don't accept responsibility without leverage. You don't confuse busyness with value. You evaluate work by what it does to your life, not your resume. That makes you dangerous in a quiet way because you can say no calmly. Now let's talk about income. You may still earn a salary. Many people do. The difference is it's no longer your lifeline. It's a component, one stream among others, one option among many. And because it's no longer critical, it no longer controls you. This is the paradox. The moment salary stops being essential, it becomes more useful. Now let's talk about fear. Fear doesn't disappear, but it no longer governs. You're not afraid of losing income. You're aware of transition cost. You're not afraid of uncertainty. You're familiar with it. You've built systems that absorb shock. That familiarity creates calm. Now let's talk about lifestyle again. Your lifestyle is not maximal. It's intentional. You spend where it matters. You ignore what doesn't. Not because you're disciplined, because you're aligned. Alignment removes temptation. Now let's talk about time one last time. Time feels different outside the trap. Not infinite, not abundant, but yours. You don't feel rushed into decisions. You don't feel behind in life. You don't feel like you're waiting to start living. You're already there. Now here's the most important truth of this chapter. Escaping the salary trap is not a moment. It's a posture, a way of standing in the world. You don't fall back accidentally once that posture is learned, because you can feel misalignment immediately. Now pause. If you imagine this life and chapter of you feels calm, not excited, calm, that's recognition. And recognition matters more than motivation. In the final chapter, we're going to close this audiobook properly, not with hype, not with promises, but with a grounded reminder of what actually matters, what to protect, and how to carry this thinking forward without turning it into another obsession. This is where everything settles. Chapter 18, The Quiet Conclusion and What Comes Next. Nothing dramatic happens at the end. There is no finish line, no announcement, no moment where the world confirms you were right. And that's exactly how you know this path is real. Because real freedom doesn't need witnesses. By now, you understand something most people never articulate. Money was never the problem. Income was never the solution. The problem was dependence disguised as success, and the solution was not earning more, but restructuring how money flows through your life. If you've listened carefully, you'll notice this audiobook never promised wealth. It promised control. Control over time, control over pressure, control over direction, and control changes everything. Now let's talk about what not to do next. Don't rush. Don't announce. Don't try to apply everything at once. That's the old pattern. Urgency disguised as ambition. This work is quiet. It unfolds in small decisions. What you say yes to, what you delay, what you stop upgrading, what you protect. These decisions don't impress anyone. They stabilize you. Now let's talk about obsession. Do not turn this into a new identity. Do not measure yourself constantly. Do not chase purity. That leads back to pressure. This is not about optimization. It's about alignment. Alignment feels calm, boring, stable, and stability compounds faster than intensity ever could. Now let's talk about patience one last time. The world will keep rewarding visible effort. The system will keep praising salaries. People will keep upgrading their lives loudly. Let them. You're playing a longer game now, a quieter one. Now here is the final truth of this audiobook, the line that matters more than any tactic. Wealth is not what you earn. It's what you no longer fear losing. When fear leaves, clarity arrives. When clarity arrives, decisions improve. When decisions improve, life stabilizes. That is the real compounding. If this audiobook resonated with you, don't rush to act. Sit with it. Notice what feels misaligned in your life, not what feels missing. Misalignment is the signal. If one line stayed with you, share it in the comments. If this helped you see money differently, subscribe, not for motivation, but for continuity. And if you know someone earning well but quietly drowning, send this to them. Sometimes freedom begins with hearing the right truth at the right time. Tell us what topic you want the next audiobook to explore. Because once you stop confusing income with power, you never think about money the same way again. This is not the end. It's the moment you stop living on autopilot and start designing quietly. High income is not wealth. Cash flow is not the goal. Freedom is the outcome, and now you know how it actually works. Bonus continuation. The afterword you weren't expecting if you're still here, listening. That means something inside you didn't want it to end, not because you wanted more information, but because you recognized yourself somewhere along the way. That matters. Most people consume content the way they consume money, quickly, emotionally, forgetfully. You stayed. That tells me you're not looking for noise. You're looking for orientation. So let's slow this down one last time. Because the most important shifts don't happen during the audiobook. They happen after the silence returns, when there's no narrator, no momentum, no guidance, just you and your habits. This is where everything you heard either integrates or evaporates. Here's the truth most people won't tell you. Nothing changes because you understand it. It changes because you behave differently when no one is reminding you. That's the real test. Tomorrow morning, next week, 3 months from now, when pressure reappears, when temptation whispers, when old patterns feel easier than new ones, that's when this work either becomes real or becomes something you listened to once. So here is the quiet assignment, not a task, not a challenge, a posture. From this point forward, whenever money enters your life, salary, bonus, side income, unexpected cash, pause. Not long. just long enough to ask one question: does this increase my dependence or reduce it? That question alone, asked consistently, will do more for your financial life than any strategy ever could, because it forces alignment. And alignment compounds faster than effort. You don't need to become extreme. You don't need to reject the world. You don't need to impress anyone. You just need to stop drifting unconsciously. Most people never do. They stay busy. They stay distracted. They stay reactive. You don't have to. You already saw the structure, and once you see it, you feel misalignment immediately. That feeling, that quiet discomfort when something doesn't fit anymore, that's not dissatisfaction. That's clarity forming. Honor it. Protect it. Don't drown it out with noise, upgrades, or urgency. Let it guide small decisions. Let it shape what you say yes to. Let it influence what you delay. That's how freedom actually grows. Not loudly, not fast, but permanently. If this audiobook changed how you think, even slightly, leave a comment with the one sentence that stayed with you, not for engagement, for memory. And if you want the next audiobook to go deeper into leverage, time, identity, or the psychology of independence, say the word. Because once you stop confusing income with safety, you don't go back. You design forward, quietly, deliberately, on your terms. And that, more than money, is the real upgrade